The glittering chandeliers of l'Étoile d'Argent cast a cold, unforgiving light upon Chef Ilara, a woman whose quiet dignity was often mistaken for meekness by its bombastic owner, Alistair Sterling. Tonight, that light felt like an interrogation lamp. Her son, 10-year-old Leo, small and serious, stood beside a gleaming steel counter, a tiny skillet in his hand, the aroma of perfectly browning butter and eggs, simple, honest eggs, rising faintly. He'd been carefully supervised, tucked away in a quiet corner of the vast kitchen during a lull, a small moment of maternal indulgence and culinary apprenticeship. But Mr. Sterling, a man whose arrogance was as expansive as his waistline, had a nose for anything he deemed beneath his Michelin-starred aspirations. He'd spawned into the kitchen, his face a mask of purple fury, his voice, when it came, a venomous whip. "What is the meaning of this peasant fare contaminating my kitchen?" he boomed, his jowls quivering. Ilara stepped forward, placing herself protectively, if subtly, in front of Leo. "Mr. Sterling, it was a slow moment. Leo was just practicing." "No harm done." Her voice was low, steady, a stark contrast to his theatrical rage. Sterling's laugh was a harsh, barking sound. "No harm done? Madam, your son, this child, is befouling the very air where masterpieces are created. He is cooking eggs." He spat the word out as if it were a profanity. "In my establishment?" The audacity! The sheer, unmitigated gall! Leo flinched, his lower lip trembling, but he held onto the skillet, his eyes fixed on his mother. The other kitchen staff, a mix of intimidated workers and fawning sycophants, averted their gaze, some with pity, others with a cruel smirk. Sterling swelled with self-importance, relishing his audience. "This is not some greasy spoon diner, Chef Ilara. This is l'Étoile d'Argent. We serve artistry, not breakfast slop." He pointed a sausage-like finger at the offending skillet. "You, madam, have shown a profound lack of judgment, a disrespect for the sanctity of this kitchen. And for that, your services are no longer required. You are fired." The words, sharp and brutal, hung in the suddenly silent kitchen. Ilara felt a cold dread, but her expression remained composed. She had endured Sterling's tirades, his prejudices, his casual cruelties for years, all for the sake of Leo, for the steady paycheck that kept them afloat. She had silently catalogued every sneer, every insult, every whispered insinuation about her capabilities simply because of who she was, a black woman in a world Sterling believed belonged to men like him. This, however, was a new low, a public evisceration designed to break her. Leo finally looked up at Sterling, his small face pale but his eyes holding a spark of defiance his mother knew well. "They're good eggs," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Sterling scoffed. "Good eggs? Boy, you wouldn't know good food if it slapped you across your impertinent face. Get out, both of you. And take your culinary abominations with you." Ilara gently took the skillet from Leo's hand. The eggs were perfect, golden-edged, the yolk still soft. She met Sterling's furious gaze, a flicker of something unreadable in her own. "Very well, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice betraying no emotion. She took Leo's hand, and without a backward glance at the opulent, soulless kitchen that had been her prison for 5 long years, she walked out, leaving behind the suffocating scent of arrogance and the faint, lingering aroma of perfectly cooked eggs. The millionaire restaurant owner had just fired his most talented, most underpaid chef over a child's simple breakfast. He thought he was teaching her a lesson about class and refinement. He had no earthly idea he had just cooked his own goose, spectacularly. What happened next? Well, dear viewers, settle in, because this is a tale of karmic justice served piping hot. If you're enjoying this story of resilience against arrogance, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales that prove the mighty can, and often do, fall. The days that followed Ilara's dismissal were a blur of anxiety and frantic job hunting. The culinary world, especially at the high end, was small and incestuous. Sterling, never one to miss an opportunity for self-aggrandizement and petty revenge, had already begun poisoning the well, painting Ilara as insubordinate and unprofessional. He reveled in his narrative, embellishing the egg incident to his cronies at exclusive chef gatherings, transforming it into a cautionary tale of an uppity employee who dared to bring street food mentality into his temple of gastronomy. Can you imagine, he'd bray, dabbing his lips with a linen napkin after a particularly rich mouthful of foie gras. Scrambled eggs. In my kitchen. As if it were some common truck stop. I had to let her go, of course. Standards, you know. One must maintain standards. His sycophantic audience would chuckle appreciatively, their laughter echoing the cruel mirth of his kitchen staff on that fateful night. Sterling felt invincible, his ego inflated by their obsequious agreement. He genuinely believed he had done a service to the culinary arts by expelling Ilara and her primitive notions of food. He imagined her now, humbled, probably struggling, a fitting punishment for her audacity. He envisioned her in some dingy diner, flipping greasy burgers, her dreams of culinary recognition shattered. This fantasy fueled his self-satisfaction. He even orchestrated a small, demeaning prank through his network, ensuring that a particularly prestigious catering gig Ilara had tentatively secured was suddenly cancelled, the reason vaguely cited as concerns over maintaining a consistent brand image. He wanted to teach her a permanent lesson, that people like her, from her background, with her simple tastes, had no place in his rarefied world. His cruelty was deliberate, calculated to inflict maximum emotional and financial pain. He saw Ilara not as a person, but as an example, a symbol of everything he disdained: simplicity, humility, and a quiet strength that unnerved him. He was a man who only understood power in its loudest, most ostentatious forms. The subtle artistry of Ilara's cooking, the depth of flavor she could coax from the humblest ingredients, was lost on him. He preferred foam and fuss, style over substance. He was, in essence, a culinary emperor with no clothes, and Ilara, with her honest eggs, had unknowingly threatened to expose his nakedness. He doubled down on his restaurant's pretentious menu, adding more gold leaf, more incomprehensible descriptions, further alienating any diner who sought genuine connection with their food. His hubris was a blinding force, leading him to believe his position and wealth made him infallible, his judgment supreme. He was so busy congratulating himself on his perceived victory over Ilara that he failed to notice the subtle shifts in the culinary landscape, the growing hunger for authenticity, for food made with soul, the very essence of what Ilara, and indeed young Leo, represented. His pronouncements about the standards and artistry became increasingly hollow, a desperate attempt to shore up a reputation built on snobbery rather than genuine talent. He was, quite literally, digging his own grave with a silver spoon, one condescending remark at a time. The delicious irony, of course, was that his campaign to humiliate Ilara was the very thing that would inadvertently shine a spotlight on her, setting the stage for his own public unraveling. Ilara, meanwhile, though bruised, was not broken. She channeled her frustration into action, taking on small catering jobs, cooking from her tiny apartment kitchen, her food infused with a passion and resilience that Sterling could never comprehend. Leo, bless his heart, became her most enthusiastic assistant and taste tester, his earlier hurt transmuting into a fierce protectiveness of his mother and her craft. One sweltering afternoon, while delivering a batch of her renowned spiced honey cakes to a small community fair, fate intervened. A woman, impeccably dressed but with kind, observant eyes, paused at Ilara's modest stall. This was Vivian Holloway, a notoriously discerning food critic and investor, known for her sharp palate and even sharper pen, a woman who had eviscerated far grander establishments than L'Etoile d'Argent for their lack of soul. She had a reputation for championing unsung heroes of the culinary world. Unbeknownst to Ilara, Miss Holloway had been idly wandering the fair, seeking refuge from the city's pretentious dining scene, craving something real. Leo, seeing Miss Holloway hesitate, offered her a small, perfectly formed financier, still warm from the portable oven. "My mom made them," he said, his voice earnest. "They're the best." Miss Holloway smiled, charmed by his sincerity, and accepted the tiny cake. She took a bite. Her eyes widened, almost imperceptibly. The financier was exquisite, delicate, almond-rich, with a hint of brown butter that spoke of true skill. It was simple, yet profound. "This is remarkable," she murmured, looking at Ilara, who was busy arranging a tray of miniature quiches. "Who taught you to bake like this?" Ilara, surprised by the intensity of the compliment from this elegant stranger, simply said, "My grandmother." And years of practice over the next hour, Miss Holloway sampled nearly everything Ilara had on offer, each bite confirming her initial impression. This was not just competent cooking, this was artistry born of love and deep understanding. Then, Leo, remembering the injustice, piped up, "My mom used to be a chef at a big fancy restaurant, l'Étoile d'Argent, but the mean owner fired her because I cooked eggs." Miss Holloway's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "He fired you or for eggs?" Ilara, initially mortified by Leo's outburst, saw a flicker of genuine interest in Miss Holloway's eyes and decided to tell her story, the unvarnished truth of Sterling's disdain, the public humiliation, the casual cruelty. She spoke not with bitterness, but with a quiet dignity that impressed Miss Holloway even more than her food. He said, Ilara recalled, her voice steady, that it was peasant fare. An abomination. Miss Holloway listened intently, her expression thoughtful. When Ilara finished, she said, "Mr. Sterling, I believe, prefers presentation over substance. Your food, Chef Ilara, has substance. It has heart. And those eggs your son cooked? I'd wager they were more honest and flavorful than anything Sterling has served in years." Then, she looked at Leo. "Young man, would you ever consider cooking those eggs for me?" Leo beamed. "Yes." This was the moment the tide began to turn. Ilara didn't know it yet, but her hidden power, her integrity, her exceptional talent for creating real food, and the quiet years she'd spent observing Sterling's empire, was about to be unleashed. For 5 years, while Sterling preened and postured, Ilara had seen everything: the watered-down wines served as premium vintages, the prime cuts that were anything but, the doctored invoices, the systematic underpayment of undocumented kitchen staff. She had kept meticulous, silent records, not out of malice, but as a shield, a just-in-case. She hadn't known when or how she might use them, but a deep-seated instinct told her to be prepared. Now, looking at Vivian Holloway's intelligent, discerning face, Ilara felt a stirring of hope, a sense that justice, like a perfectly simmered sauce, might finally be ready. Vivian Holloway was a woman of action. Intrigued by Ilara's story and deeply impressed by her culinary genius, she proposed an idea: a pop-up dinner. Not just any pop-up, but one designed to showcase Ilara's talent, to be held in a chic, understated gallery space. The guest list would be curated by Holloway herself, influential food bloggers, journalists, potential investors, and, most deliciously, a few of Sterling's culinary rivals. The centerpiece of the evening? A tasting menu that began with Leo's perfect eggs, elevated to an art form by Ilara, served alongside a humble explanation of their origin. The irony was not lost on Ms. Holloway. As preparations for the pop-up moved forward, Ms. Holloway also began a discreet investigation into Alastair Sterling and l'Étoile d'Argent. Ilara, hesitant at first, finally shared the meticulous record she had kept: copies of doctored supplier invoices showing inferior ingredients purchased at low cost but billed to diners as premium, photographs of unsanitary conditions in the secondary storage areas Sterling never showed health inspectors, anonymized testimonies from former staff detailing wage theft and verbal abuse, even a recording she discreetly made on her phone one day of Sterling boasting to his accountant about creative bookkeeping to minimize his tax burden. Ms. Holloway's legal team, a formidable group accustomed to dealing with corporate malfeasance, reviewed the evidence. Their assessment was blunt: Sterling was not just arrogant, he was corrupt. The night of the pop-up arrived. The gallery was abuzz. Ilara, calm and focused in her temporary kitchen, moved with quiet efficiency. Leo, wearing a miniature chef's coat, proudly assisted with the plating of the first course, his eggs, served in a delicate porcelain dish, topped with a whisper of truffle and a single chive blossom. When Ms. Holloway introduced Ilara and explained the story behind Leo's perfect eggs, a ripple of murmurs went through the room. Some guests, familiar with Sterling's bombast, exchanged knowing glances. The rest of the meal was a triumph, course after course of soulful, exquisitely crafted food that spoke of heritage, passion, and undeniable talent. The contrast to Sterling's overwrought, soulless cuisine was stark and deliberate. Midway through the dinner, as guests savored Ilara's signature slow-braised oxtail with grits, Ms. Holloway took the microphone again. Tonight, she began, her voice clear and carrying, "We celebrate authentic talent. But authenticity also demands accountability." Then, with devastating precision, she laid out the findings of her investigation into l'Étoile d'Argent. She didn't name Ilara as the source initially, merely presenting the facts. She spoke of consumer fraud, of misleading menus, of potential health code violations, and serious financial irregularities. She announced that a full dossier of evidence had been handed over to the relevant city authorities and the tax office that very afternoon. Visuals appeared on a large screen, redacted invoices, blurred but damning photos of the grimy storage, snippets of Sterling's recorded boasts. The room fell into a stunned silence. The implications were clear. Alistair Sterling, the self-proclaimed bastion of culinary excellence, was a fraud. His empire, built on pretense and exploitation, was about to crumble. Ilara watched from the kitchen doorway, her expression serene. This wasn't just revenge, it was rectification. It was for every quiet insult, every dismissive wave of his hand, every time he had made her feel small and insignificant. It was for Leo, and for all the other unseen, unheard workers propping up his glittering facade. The unraveling had begun, public and undeniable, triggered by the very peasant fare he had so cruelly mocked. The fallout from Vivian Holloway's revelations was swift and brutal. The city's health department, armed with Ilara's detailed notes and photographs, launched an immediate, unannounced inspection of l'Étoile d'Argent. They found exactly what Ilara had documented: expired ingredients artfully concealed, rodent droppings in the reserve dry storage, and falsified temperature logs. The restaurant was shut down on the spot, a bright orange condemnation notice slapped on its gleaming front door, a public badge of shame. Simultaneously, the tax authorities, armed with the evidence of Sterling's creative bookkeeping, froze his business accounts and initiated a full-scale audit. News outlets, smelling blood in the water, descended. The story was irresistible: Michelin hopeful eatery shut down. Owner accused of fraud, exploitation. Sterling's carefully crafted image shattered like a cheap wine glass. His face, once smug and condescending, was now a mask of disbelief and sputtering rage as reporters ambushed him outside his opulent penthouse. His denials were weak, his bluster hollow. Close-ups of his shocked, defeated expression filled gossip columns and news segments. His sycophantic staff, the ones who had smirked at Ilara's humiliation, quickly scattered, fearing association with the sinking ship. His friends in the industry suddenly couldn't recall his name. The calls from his lawyers became more frequent, their voices more grave. Bankruptcy loomed. Lawsuits from former employees, emboldened by Ilara's courage and Ms. Holloway's backing, began to pile up, alleging wage theft and abusive working conditions. The public, once perhaps intimidated or impressed by Sterling's facade, now saw him for what he was: a bully and a cheat. The dramatic irony was palpable to everyone. The man who had sneered at simple eggs, who had built his reputation on an illusion of superiority, was brought down by the very things he despised: honesty, integrity, and the irrefutable truth. His downfall was a direct consequence of his own arrogance, his belief that he was above reproach, beyond consequence. He had sought to humiliate Ilara for a minor, human act, and in doing so, had engineered his own spectacular, public disgrace. His restaurant, l'Étoile d'Argent, once a symbol of his inflated ego, became a monument to his colossal failure. The glittering chandeliers now cast their cold light on empty tables and dust-covered chairs. The silence in the once bustling kitchen was absolute, save for the scurrying of unwelcome guests Sterling could no longer afford to exterminate. His attempts to belittle Ilara, to crush her spirit, had backfired in the most karmic way imaginable. He had tried to extinguish her light, only to find himself consumed by the darkness of his own making. His empire of lies had crumbled to dust, all because he couldn't see the value in a perfectly cooked egg, or the dignity of the woman who allowed her son to make it. The contrast between Ilara's quiet, determined expression as she pursued her craft and Sterling's increasingly panicked, disheveled appearance was a visual testament to their divergent paths. He had sown contempt and reaped ruin. In the wake of Sterling's spectacular implosion, Ilara, with the steadfast backing of Vivian Holloway, didn't just reclaim her place, she redefined it. Together, they transformed a charming, neglected bistro in a vibrant neighborhood into the humble hearth, a name chosen by Leo. The design was warm, inviting, filled with reclaimed wood, soft lighting, and the comforting clatter of a happy, open kitchen. There were no Michelin pretensions, no gold leaf, no indecipherable menu items. Instead, there was food made with love, skill, and the freshest local ingredients, the kind of food Ilara had always yearned to cook freely. The centerpiece of the menu, proudly listed under appetizers, was Leo's perfect eggs, the dish that started it all. It became their most popular item, a delicious symbol of their journey. Ilara made it a point to hire many of the staff Sterling had mistreated, the dishwasher he'd underpaid, the line cook he'd verbally abused, the server whose ideas he'd stolen. At the humble hearth, they found respect, fair wages, and a collaborative environment. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was a community, a testament to resilience. The contrast was stark, from the cold, sterile kitchen of l'Étoile d'Argent where Ilara once toiled under a broom of perceived inferiority. She now presided over her own domain, a place of warmth and genuine culinary artistry. From her small, cramped apartment, she now looked out from the office of a thriving business, not just as a chef, but as an owner, a leader, a beacon of hope. The humble hearth became a sensation, lauded by critics not just for its exceptional food but for its ethos. It was more than just a restaurant, it was a story of triumph, of quiet dignity prevailing over loud arrogance. Ilara used her newfound platform and a portion of the profits to establish the Second Chance Kitchen, a foundation dedicated to providing culinary training and mentorship to aspiring chefs from marginalized backgrounds, individuals often underestimated or overlooked by the traditional culinary establishment. She wanted to ensure that others with talent and passion wouldn't have to endure the kind of prejudice and exploitation she had faced. Leo, now a confident preteen, often helped in the kitchen on weekends, his love for cooking nurtured and celebrated. He was living proof that talent could blossom anywhere, given the right conditions. Ilara's victory wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration, restoring her dignity, restoring faith in honest cooking, and restoring opportunities for others. Her success was a quiet, powerful statement against the superficiality and cruelty she had endured. Sterling, meanwhile, was a broken man, his reputation in tatters, his wealth diminished by legal fees and fines. He became a footnote, a cautionary tale whispered in culinary circles about the perils of hubris. His downfall was complete, a direct result of his inability to see worth beyond the narrow confines of his own prejudice. Ilara, on the other hand, flourished, her spirit unburdened, her talent shining brighter than ever. She had turned injustice into inspiration, humiliation into a foundation for a better future, not just for herself and her son, but for many others. Her journey from a dismissed chef to a celebrated restaurateur and philanthropist was complete, a truly triumphant resolution. And so, this chapter in Ilara's life, and the ignominious end of Alastair Sterling's reign, draws to a close. What can we glean from this dramatic turn of events, you ask? The moral of this story echoes through the ages, as relevant in the gleaming kitchens of haute cuisine as it is in the quiet corridors of everyday life. It speaks volumes about the insidious nature of prejudice, how it blinds those in power to true worth, making them see only what their narrow biases allow. Mr. Sterling looked at Ilara, a black woman, and her young son, and saw not talent or potential, but an affront to his contrived standards. He underestimated her resilience, her intelligence, and the quiet power of her integrity, a fatal miscalculation. This tale is a stark reminder that dignity is inherent, it cannot be conferred by wealth or status, nor can it be stripped away by arrogance or cruelty. Ilara maintained her quiet dignity even in the face of public humiliation, while Sterling, for all his bluster, possessed none. True power, as Ilara's journey demonstrates, lies not in domination or condescension, but in authenticity, skill, and the courage to remain true to oneself, even when the world tries to diminish you. It is the power of a perfectly cooked egg, simple and honest, against the empty spectacle of gold-dusted foam. Underestimation is a dangerous game, often played by fools who mistake quietness for weakness, and humility for lack of ambition. They forget that still waters often run deep, and that those who are consistently overlooked are often the most observant, patiently gathering the very stones that will eventually pave the path to their detractors' downfall. Let this be a lesson: never judge a book by its cover, nor a chef by the simplicity of the dish her child chooses to cook. For in the humblest of beginnings, the greatest strengths are often forged, and from the deepest injustices, the most profound and inspiring triumphs can arise. The universe has a funny way of balancing the scales, and as Alastair Sterling learned, karmic justice, much like Ilara's cooking, is a dish best served with undeniable truth and a side of public accountability. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If Ilara's story of resilience and triumph resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Mr. Sterling's downfall? And don't forget to subscribe for more inspirational stories where the underestimated rise and justice prevails.